Hello everyone, my name is Joanne Lockwood and I am your host for the Inclusion Bites podcast. In this series I have interviewed a number of amazing people and simply had a conversation around the subject of inclusion, belonging and generally making the world a better place for everyone to thrive. If you'd like to join me in the future, then please do drop me a line to joe.lockwood@seechangehappen.co.uk. That's SEE changehappen.co.uk. You can catch up with all of the previous shows on iTunes, Spotify, and the usual places. So plug in your headphones, grab a decaf, and let's get going. Today is episode 50, with the title Learning to Talk, to Listen, and to Learn. And I have the absolute honour and privilege to be joined by Iain Chapman. Iain describes himself as someone who is just a generally helpful, kind, and decent person. And when I asked Iain to describe his superpower, he said it is being a connector man. If you ask Iain to put you in touch with someone, he generally knows them. Hello, Iain. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Joanne. Good morning, everybody. Lovely to join you. Really delighted. I'm on number 50. I like to think that's a bit special, but congratulations on the 49 previously.
I think it is. I think you have the honour of being the half century, and we could talk about your love of cricket as well in a minute if you wish.
Absolutely,
so you've got the half century there.
Absolutely.
So, Iain, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned one of your mantras is learning to talk, listen, and to learn. What does that mean to you?
Well, to me, so I'll just give you a little bit of background for your listeners. So I'm 54-year-old. I'm a heterosexual male. I'm married to my wife, Sally. I've got no children. I live in Barnsley in South Yorkshire, and I've got a dog. So I have very much come from a background of two loving parents who've supported me throughout my life. And I would say that I don't necessarily fit into any particular diversity group. Quite often we talk about diversity and we talk about, kind of like ethnicity or disability or whoever, whatever background. I am just me. I just like to be just me. And I think that's one of the things that I would love everybody to be able to just be them. And I think that's the most important thing. So that's just a little bit of background about me. I've come from a an upbringing where I've been quite blessed to be surrounded by quite a lot of different people. And my current role, I'm absolutely surrounded by some amazing people, amazing colleagues who've literally given me the opportunity to learn, to develop. It's one of these things as a white middle class chap in his 50s. You hope that you turn into something decent in life as you go through life. Well, I think the people that are around me are turning me into an even better person than I probably was a few years ago, just by educating, listening, talking, understanding, supporting, connecting. So I feel like I'm in a really good place in life at the moment, but it hasn't always been that way, which is for me part of the reason why I was happy to come and jump aboard and have a conversation, because I feel it's really important in many respects for whoever's listening that life's not, in the words of the great Ronan Keating, life is a roller coaster and you've just got to ride it type of thing, and you never know what's quite round the corner. So that's me. I'm a massive sports fan. I've been, ever since the age of 13, I think it was, I went to my first football match. And ever since then, I've been travelling all over the country watching football. Not just England, but Scotland and Wales, and if I go on holiday, I love holidays. I'm a massive traveller, and one of the things that always seems to happen is we turn up in a city somewhere in the world, and the first thing that I look for is a football ground. So I'm almost obsessed by it. But at the same time, that's had its own challenges. From being the stereotypical young man growing up in the 80s, going to football, to the bloke in his 50s, surrounded by some lovely people, some great friends, but you kind of you look at it slightly differently at this age. You don't get so emotionally involved in it. You tend to spend more time listening to those around you and those around you's opinions. And so what I do during the day, where I'm sharing and listening and supporting and all those things, I then take into my football life. And I could be stood in a pub pre-match listening to some, opinions that, if that was at work, I would be challenging those opinions. Or if it was people that I've known for a while, I would probably ask why they are saying those things, you know, in some respects. Whereas if you're in a pub surrounded by people that you don't necessarily know, you've got to pick and choose your conversations. So you've got to be very careful. In my knowledge, a few years ago, I'd have probably been a little bit more. Yeah, I would have probably been a little less careful. I'll put it that way. But now I'm far more sensible. My wife keeps saying to me, "Don't get into an argument. Don't get into a conversation," and she's absolutely right. So that's just a little bit about my
Yes.
background.
Well, that's a great intro, Ian, and I feel like I've got to know you a whole lot better the last couple of minutes. So, as you said, you're kind of this stereotypical early 50s white male, had a relatively privileged life by your own admission, stable family background in your childhood, a reasonably stable. Well, you sound like you have a fantastic life with your wife and your dog now,
Mm.
and a great hobby. When I speak to other people who are similar to yourself in terms of age and gender and ethnicity, there's a lot of fear about getting involved in conversations around inclusion and diversity. It's almost like this, as a white person, what do you know, as a male, what do you know about being inclusive? You almost feel like you're not qualified to join in the conversations. How do you cope with that?
I have to say, to start with, um, I, so if you go right the way back, I was talking about it to my mum. So my mum's in her 80s. Well, no, she's actually 80 on the 30th of December, and I was talking about it to my mum because one of my very first memories in life, as I'd have probably been 3 or 4 years old, um, was my mum and dad did a lot of voluntary work. They supported charities. My dad was a preacher in the Methodist Church, a local preacher for 56 years of his life, giving so much time, which is where I think I got a lot of my hopefully good qualities from. So when I was a tiny lad, um, one day a week, we used to have a young disabled man that used to come to our house and have tea. And as you can imagine, as a toddler, well, not a toddler, going, you know, 3, 4 years old, you sat at the dinner table with mum telling you what you've got to have for tea, sat next to somebody who you haven't got a clue who they are, and they're in a wheelchair and they're being spoon fed and they weren't part of my family. And I was talking to my mum about it, as I said, and I found it fascinating that almost 50 years later, I'm learning still about what happened in my childhood. And um, it was really interesting because this, my mum and dad, as I said, did lots of voluntary work. And one of the charities that they supported back then was what was called the Spastic Society, who are now Scope. And it very much leads on to a conversation about language, because if you, and we'll probably touch on this in a little bit if that's okay, but if nowadays, if you used the word spastic, most of us would put our head in our hands and be absolutely horrified if you had heard that word. Whereas back then, that was the name of the charity. And then I think the charity recognised that it wasn't a name that, kind of like doing them any, well, I was about to say doing them any favors. I don't think it was that. I think it was just, language has changed and things like that. So they changed the charity scope. So right from an early stage, I was, kind of like mixing with people I didn't know and understanding, even though I wasn't necessarily understanding it at the time. But it was, there was, um, I was this white young, 4-year-old moving into life with disabled people coming into our house. And then one of the next memories was my mum was a volunteer for the Samaritans. So back in the day where you had a phone that was at the bottom of the stairs and it actually had numbers in it, and and you got like a round for all the young people out there who've just got a mobile phone that sits in your pocket. It used to have a a, a a handle and everything. And my mum used to sit on the bottom of the stairs for hours at a time talking to strangers. And I used to walk into the house thinking, "Who's my mum talking to on the phone?" And I never understood. And this was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and I genuinely didn't understand. And then once I became old enough, then my mum explained to me that she was a volunteer for the Samaritans, helping people who were in crisis and helping people who were at tipping point in their life. And just little things like this that were huge things, I think has kind of like molded me into the person that I hope that I am at the moment. So where you talk about me being, from a as I would say, a privileged background, a white male, and a lot of people kind of like find it very difficult to get into the conversation. I probably find it difficult sometimes to get into the conversation as well, because I'm always worried that I'm offending somebody. When I was, I'll rephrase that. I'm not so worried anymore. I was worried. I was worried that I might be saying the wrong thing, or I might not have the knowledge, or, did I have the experience to being that in that conversation? But then when you actually look back and you think, well, actually, yes, because do you really have to have um, you know that level of education to be able to join a conversation? No, because we can all join a conversation and learn. Um, and probably the biggest influence in my life has always been my dad. My dad was an incredibly intelligent man. And my dad basically used to say to me, if you learn one thing every single day of your life, you will be an incredibly knowledgeable person. And that's something that I try to do. Diversity, inclusion is a part of that. And it's been a huge part of my life over especially the last 5 years. So, yes.
Yeah. I mean, the title of this episode is Talk, Listen and Learn. And it is so right. We've not met everybody in the world, and on the basis that everybody is a unique individual. We can't hope to know everybody, but what we can do is develop a level of emotional intelligence, a level of cultural awareness and cultural intelligence to be able to have conversations with different people and not be afraid. And I think that's the key there is being confident enough to listen to somebody, to understand what makes them happy and what makes them sad. That's what I often say when I'm training is, if you know what makes me happy, you know what makes me sad, I'd like to think you'll just talk about things that make me happy and not try and make things that make me sad. I think if you just boil it down to that when you're communicating, then it's a very easy way to start conversations and get to know people. And I always often say is that sit down, have a coffee, even if that's a Zoom coffee or a chat, and just ask someone what makes them tick. You know, what makes you special. What are you proud of in life? And sometimes people will share. You know, you go beyond that superficial. How do you look? You know, on the outside you look like a white man. On the inside you've got this. You're like the TARDIS. You've got so much depth of personality, lived experience, things that make you happy and sad. And just by stereotyping you and judging you by the way you look, doesn't uncover any of that hidden knowledge you have. And I think that's the powerful lesson that I've learned over probably a similar sort of time frame, 5 or 6 years, about being immersing myself into the D&I space. And I could see, yeah, when I looked at what you wrote before the show about the work you're doing with the organisation in terms of organising communications and webinars and sessions and awareness to 5, 10,000 people across your organisation. All of those nuggets you're working on not only enrich the lives of the staff and colleagues, but also yourself. I'm presuming you must be enriching yourself through organising that and learning about that in your own way.
Absolutely. It's for me, the whole lockdown experience, the whole working from home experience for all of our colleagues, it's given us a new opportunity. It's brought everybody, I think, a lot closer together. I think it's given, certainly at Aon where I work, it's made us look at things, how we do things slightly differently, as most employers, I will guess, and most employees, I would guess, we've all had to do things slightly differently. And one thing that we recognized was that I'm Mr. Sociable. I walk into any of our offices and generally I'll find somebody that I know that I can go and have a chat with and I could sit next to, be it from Bristol all the way up to Glasgow. But obviously, most of the conversations in my local office, which was Leeds, would happen in a social zone, in a kitchen, in a coffee shop at lunchtime, or a pub, or playing sport, or all the social things. Not necessarily when you're sat at your desk doing your job. It was the bits, the walking down the corridor, or the getting in the lift and saying, "Oh, morning, you're right, yeah, I'm fine, thank you." So when we went into the lockdown position, we thought, how do we connect all these people that are missing those conversations? And it was my colleague who, we sat down and came up with this idea, and we decided to call it Connecting Colleagues Speaker Series. And it gave us an opportunity to do, as we said, connect colleagues and listen to somebody with all of the themes had like an inclusion theme, because we all needed a bit of inclusion at that point, in May 2020. We were just coming out or we were still in a lockdown situation, and we just felt that we could do this thing. So our very first speaker had just returned from shared parental leave. And so we advertised this thing, and for some reason 130 odd colleagues joined us, which was like, wow, 130 people joined us, and listened and learnt about this colleague's background, this colleague's ethnicity, his role, and then how it had been for him and his partner sharing the first 12 months of their newborn baby. And it was quite inspiring. And so we then did another, and we did another, and we did another, and this has just evolved, and it continues to evolve. And for me, it's given not only colleagues the opportunity to learn, to listen, to open up. What you just said there about a conversation, anybody can have a conversation. It's having the confidence to have that conversation. It's having the confidence to approach somebody. It's having the confidence to, ask that question with somebody that that you think, oh, will they feel offended if I ask them a question? Should I be asking them the question? So the whole connecting colleagues thing was getting colleagues of any level, whoever they may be. We've had the CEO, we've had graduates, we've had um, any level, any background, any gender. We've had all sorts of people, from Scotland all the way down to Bristol. We've had overseas colleagues joining us, and it's incredible what you can learn after 31 sessions of colleagues, talking about things like sexism, racism, domestic abuse, menopause, autism, through to positivity, lockdown experience, your role, and I think it's made so many people more aware. It's certainly made me more aware of what's going on in society. And that was the whole point, was that if we've got colleagues who, one of the recent ones, we had two colleagues talking about their experience of going through menopause. And it's one of those taboo subjects that doesn't get talked about. It doesn't get talked about at work. If somebody is going through menopause, they might confide in a friend or colleague, or they might tell the line manager. Some don't. Whereas we had this conversation, we had over 300 people join the conversation and listen to these colleagues sharing their experiences. And it's like, they're brave, they're honest, they're open, but it's just everyday life. And hopefully we're talking about everyday life, and we're inspiring others to talk about everyday life. And then on the back of it, we're then hoping that those people that have joined might feel able to open up, be themselves, and not hide something. We talk about being your authentic self, coming to work and being your authentic self. You shouldn't have to leave something in the car park or at home when you come to work, and that can be anything. That can be your sexual orientation, you might have a mental health condition, it could be your race, it could be, that, you're struggling with something going on at home. It could be all sorts of things. And most people tend to hide these things. And we're very much, well, you don't have to hide them. There'll always be somebody to talk and listen to. And we're trying to bring that
I like,
out of people.
yeah. I like to encourage organisations to do exactly as you're doing in the organisation, is to have this program of events. And I certainly don't encourage anyone to do this kind of performative hashtag following program where suddenly you're doing everything around I don't know, LGBT History Month or something, just because it is that month. It's about this continual program, not necessarily just aligned to characteristics, but it's around lived experience. You say menopause is very intersectional. It covers a whole different sector of women and their experiences. As you say, it has been something that has been oppressed in the workplace and almost culturally oppressed as well. Working in a mainly male background where men as women want to feel that we are kind of equal to men, and menopause is one of those things that potentially knocks our confidence. And as you're aware, things like brain fog, things like anxiety that creep in, itching, heat, etc., etc. There's a whole subculture and language around menopause that many people aren't comfortable talking about because it's been that taboo subject. And I think it's really, really powerful
It is.
where organisations such as yours normalize the conversation. So you're having this conversation around a subject you maybe only partially have heard of, and then you're hearing people talking openly around it, and it gives you that permission to learn. It gives you that permission to be able to have that conversation yourself and ask questions and be more aware. And I was talking to a colleague the other day, a friend the other day, about normalizing conversations around menopause. In one way, it benefits the workplace, but without being flippant about it, it also helps people's marriages and people's personal lives, because we're not talking about this in the home environment either, where the cause of many breakdowns and many stresses in marriages are around perimenopause and menopause time. So by bringing this into the workplace, we're actually helping people in their personal lives as well. So I think it's so powerful. And I think what you're doing there is admirable. Do you measure the effectiveness? I mean, I appreciate this is not around it's not about measurement, but can you see positivity developing?
Yeah, you can. The all of the sessions that we've done, I think we've had a combined audience so far of around 7,500 live, viewers, listeners, whatever you like to call it, and then we record all the sessions. And um, most of the sessions, so I'll give you the example with the menopause session. So as with most of your Zooms or your WebExes or your Teams, your platforms that you use, we have a chat box at the bottom right. So the menopause session created a huge amount of conversation by colleagues that were listening, and colleagues felt that they wanted to join the conversation in the chat box. And um, one thing that I always do with the conversations is I always copy the chat box, paste it onto a document, just to make sure that if there is any questions that we've missed throughout the conversation, I feel that it's really important to, if somebody's taken the time during that conversation to actually ask a question, and as we all know, a presentation, a chat, it goes so quickly, and it's very difficult to make sure that we've actually gone back to everybody. So I always do this just to make sure that if there is somebody that we've missed, we can go back to them, or one of the speakers will go back to them, or we'll connect them with somebody. And on the menopause session, I copied it and pasted it onto a Word document, and it was 11 and a half pages long. The chat box just copied onto a Word document, which just shows the power of the conversation. And one of the things that at Aon, we're hugely supported. I think as colleagues, we're very fortunate. We're hugely supported. The organisation give us lots of uh, different benefits and support tools, and we've got mental health first aiders, and we've got lots and lots of great things that we can pass on to colleagues on these sessions, because not everybody's 100% aware that we've got all of these brilliant private medical insurance or an employee assistance program and things like that. So we've got all these things, but often people don't recognize that we've got all these things. So that particular session, we had a colleague from our HR team who joined the session as well and spoke about all the benefits that were available. So what started as somebody suggesting it would be quite nice if we talked about menopause, to me, and I was like, yeah, let's go for it. And in the end, it's turned into a huge conversation. A couple of there's follow-ups going on. There will be um, um, various different things. We've always had like a guide on the menopause, which is being updated, and so there's so much positivity that comes out of just one conversation like that. What you said about family, my wife Sally, she's going through menopause at the moment, and I didn't understand. And so I'm hosting a session at work with 300 plus people listening to two people who are brave enough to have the openness and the conversation. And I'm learning myself about what's going on in my own house that I didn't recognize. I didn't understand. I've not had that conversation with, with my wife of 16 years. I'd not had that conversation. So just where you say the impact, well, the impact just on me as an individual was huge, because now I can have that conversation. I can recognize, you know, um, things that my wife is going through, and the one person who's most important in my life is my wife. And yet before that conversation, I was slightly blinkered, and it was like, oh, here she is, bad mood again. That type of typical, you know, um, when you live with somebody for 20 odd years, kind of like reaction, oh, I've done something wrong. And it's just literally what's happening in Sally's life. So, yeah, it's hugely important, hugely important.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, do we do anything with all of the numbers, all of the, um, I've got a massive, great big spreadsheet of colleagues who just keep joining this thing, um, because hopefully people recognise that there might be something that's going to come up that will benefit them, that will help them. One of the best sessions that I think that we've done was when the George Floyd got murdered last year, and our multicultural network, um, you know, had the platform on speaker series to talk about talking to kids about race. And there was it was a very awkward conversation that a lot of people like myself who maybe had kids didn't really know how to have that conversation with their white child, for example. um, and our multicultural network, people from different ethnicities, different parts of the country, all jumped on board and just basically helped, kind of like help them, people like me understand that it is all right to have that conversation, and gave us resources and ideas and thoughts and tips, and how they've had the conversation, how difficult it's been for them growing up, and then how difficult it can be for their child to grow up. So yeah, there's a lot
When
of
I,
positives.
when I talk to other organisations, one of the challenges they have is it's not so much about the people who are in the room, because you tend to have there are certain people who are kind of, let's use the word woke. They're awake to the issues of social injustice. They're keen to learn. They want to find out more, and they're always receptive to this knowledge. I often say it's the people who aren't in the room are the ones that I want to talk to, because they're the ones that are not engaging. So how do you, as an individual, maybe suggest trying to engage with people who are the unengaged, which is I will see is the challenge.
It's a huge challenge, I have to say, and I think personally, I think, I'll put work to one side, but in my personal life, I've had many instances, especially over the last 2 years, since lockdown. I'm very passionate about a lot of, diversity issues, inclusion issues, and I've got some people that I've almost grew up with, I've known for 20, 30 years, that just won't accept change. They will not accept. They don't, they're your typical banter people. Well, it's only a joke. Well, it isn't a joke. You're constantly being sexist, racist, homophobic. you know, well, I don't mean to say, it's only a bit of a joke, isn't it? Well, no, it isn't a bit of a joke. Um, and, there's a couple of people that I grew up with up here in South Yorkshire, and really good friends. We've been friends for years and years and years. And, we went through a situation where they were taking exception to, the whole issue last year of, following George Floyd's death, and people pulling statues down, and then, things like the last night of the proms. You're not allowed to sing "Rule Britannia" and things like that, and they they were literally up in arms about it. Why on earth should we have to change? Why? And I was like, well, just take a step back and understand and try and listen to other people's opinions. The reason that Beyonce's song about her brown skin, I think it was, or something like that, a song about that she'd written about her daughter. They were even commenting on things like that on Facebook, saying, "Well, if I'd have said this, me and my white skin, I'd have been burnt at the stake for it." And I'm like, "Well, no, you wouldn't." And then we just got into a whole debate, and eventually, I chose to walk away from the debate because they weren't listening, and they didn't want to listen. To be honest, I don't think they want to listen. I think, and I think that's where it can be very difficult. There's a lot of people who do want to learn, who do want to understand, who are culturally curious, who want to make themselves slightly more educated, slightly more understanding, slightly better in their knowledge. And then you get these other people who just literally don't want to. And I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest challenge. Where do you draw that line of, right, I'm going to back off from my argument now. I'm going to choose my battles. I'm going to choose my discussions. And on the back of that particular incident, I commented on the Beyonce. I'm sure it was Beyonce. On one of my close friends. He was one of the people that came on my stag do, for example. And I commented, and literally some complete strangers were abusing me online. Um, telling me to go and stick my head in a bucket of water, and um, how dare I question things like that? And I was like, well, hang on a minute. This person, I've known him since he was 6. He's now in his mid-40s, so I think I've got a right to comment on somebody that I've known for however many years. And the most disappointing thing was that the people that I'd always classed as friends, and they still are friends, they didn't defend me. They didn't say, well, actually, yeah, he's been there when, I've had marriage problems. He's been there when I've needed somebody to talk to, when I've struggled. He's been there, as I have, for those people. And yet, when it came to an argument about race, they were like, "Bah, you know, this is our opinion." Um, and since then, I've slightly removed them, to one side.
Mm.
I took myself off of social media. I took myself off of WhatsApp groups that they were in, um, because literally it wasn't making me well. It was giving me anxiety. It was causing me upset, and so I literally just had to remove myself. Didn't change my opinion. My opinion stayed as it was, and if anything, it just made me stronger in my beliefs and my support for other people.
Mm.
And
I find it very similar that it's very easy to get into a very intransigent conversation where you're trying to change somebody else's view who isn't likely to change their view. And they're as intransigent about trying to persuade you that they're right as you are persuading. And it becomes a very unproductive conversation, which is why I try not to discuss outcomes or opinions or beliefs. I try to get involved in discussions around perspectives and why someone thinks something rather than what they think. And it allows me therefore not to engage in the minutiae of the debate of the argument, but trying to understand why they think that. And by having that kind of conversation, I found that people often don't know why they think something. It just is. And by using that kind of why question, okay, I understand that you have this view of this situation. Why do you think that? What's your view of the world? Then I could chip in. But the reason I think it's not fair is because if we only see white people on statues and black and brown people and non-white people aren't represented in society, how can they feel part of something? They go, well, I don't want to see black people on statues. Well, why not? They're as much part of the community and help build the environment. And if we don't want people on statues, how about we have cultural representations instead of people? Cultural representations are far more like to survive longer than people, and times change. So yeah, it's. I find that if we can have a conversation around a perspective and the why someone thinks something, it's easier. But that's also tricky, and I'm with you that I've been in environments with a group of old friends. I was at a reunion party for people I knew 40 years ago after I left school. And my view on the world has changed completely. And I was with people who had this, who has quite rightly said, I haven't had it easy. I wasn't denying they hadn't had it easy. They came from a working class background. Their father was a coal miner. That the mine was shut in the Thatcher era. They had poverty and challenges in their family as a young person. And so their argument was, I haven't had it easier either. I'm not privileged. And it's really, really tricky when you're discussing privilege is to try and swap between it's not about what you've gone through, it's about what you haven't gone through because of the color of the skin, because of your ability, because of your neuro typicalness, your able-bodiedness, whatever it may be, or your straightness or your whiteness, so you haven't gone through. And that's a really tough angle to do because you're trying to acknowledge their struggle and not deny them their right to feel they've had a struggle,
Yeah.
but introduce the concept it's about what you haven't had. And that's sometimes a real challenge when you talk about privilege, is to get people into a receptive mind where they, well, I'm not saying they're going to change their mind and suddenly have an epiphany and get it, but at least try and talk to them about how to see the world in a slightly different way. So for me, it's around trying to nudge perspectives than have disagreements on outcomes, and that's always my approach. But yeah, it's very difficult. I'm like you. I've been in situations and I end up saying, I just got to take myself out of here. This conversation is not. No one's going to win. No one's going to feel better about this, and I'm just gonna burn out. So yeah, great talking to you. Catch you another time. And it's not even agree to differ. Let's just differ. Let's just differ. I'm not agreeing
Yeah,
to differ. I'm just different.
just walk away from it. And I mean, you mentioned there, you used the word burnout. I mean, I'm a huge, um, hugely passionate about mental health. Mental health is something that I struggled with. I struggled with anxiety for many, many years. My wife, well, in fact, going back to when I said about one of the first memories in my life, when I was a toddler, my mum had agoraphobia. So for 2 years, she didn't even leave the house. When I was born and I was growing up, well, not growing up, started to develop. Um, so right from an early age, I've been very aware of, kind of like my mum's always had this, the most caring person in the world, but she's always had this slight nervousness about life. And her agoraphobia came back. I was in my 30s, and one day she rang me. My dad was working in Singapore, and she rang me, and I was like, "You're right, mum," and she just burst into tears, and I was like, "What's up?" She said, "I just can't cope." So I then went from my where I lived just down the road and went and stopped with my mum for a couple of days, and for some reason the agoraphobia came back on. And since then, I think for somebody who spent so many years helping other people, as a Samaritan, um, the reason that she joined the Samaritans because 50 years ago she was struggling herself, and it's something now in 2021 that is, kind of like, we all talk about mental health now, which is so important, which is so impactful mental health doesn't discriminate. We talk about inclusion. Well, mental health, everybody has mental health. They either have good mental health or bad mental health or somewhere in the middle. And it impacts us all in some way. We all know somebody who's impacted by mental health, be it depression, anxiety, some people wake up having a bad day and they might not realize that they're struggling. So, and it's something that when we talked about the title of this session, the talking side of things, I'm a mental health first aider. My wife's a mental health first aider in our relative jobs. We're both people that friends, family, and colleagues come to, and we've both been trained. We're properly qualified. Where I work, we've got 130 fully trained mental health first aiders now. Which is quite incredible, I think, hugely impactful in the UK, and all of them, I don't know all of them. I know a lot of them, and they're incredibly inspiring people, and you feel part of, part of this team of people that are there for others. And I just think, the whole mental health thing, when it's a very personal issue, then you get things like what happened to me last year, where we're just, I'm just, opening a conversation and then I just get abused. And then it affected me personally, it brought my anxiety back. It knocks your confidence. It makes you feel rubbish. And the easiest thing to do is like hide away, shy away. And then you kind of like, you get your toolbox out that my counsellor gave me a few years ago. It's all in my back pocket somewhere, and I got it all out. And I was like, right, go on, Iain, have a word with yourself. Think about it. Is it that important to you that somebody's who you've never met before has abused you online? Is it really that important? Is it worth making yourself ill? Well, no, it isn't worth making yourself ill. You've got a billion brilliant things in your life. You're surrounded by an amazing group of friends, family, colleagues. Why are you letting this one person upset you? And
But they can. It's
no,
and that's the thing. I mean, I have my own particular characteristic, and I know that when I'm putting myself in such situations, I put my suit of armor on. I'm prepared. I've got my padded shoulder pads. I've got all my ankle protectors and knee protectors. So when I go out into this particular environment, I know that I've got this kind of protection mechanism around me. I'm ready. I'm prepared. But there are so many times when I go into a place or go into the world where I feel safe, I feel relaxed, I feel kind of okay, and I don't put my armor on, or maybe just go armor light or something, or just my little just quickly look out, and that's when I can be affected because I'm not my mental state isn't such that I'm protecting myself. I'm just relaxed, and that's when it can affect me the most. And I often used to talk about it. I don't know if you've seen the film Dune, where
no,
they have the original one was Sting. I always remember. I know there's a new one now, but they have these suits, and so if you try and attack somebody with this electronic suit they have, the swords bounce off. But if you use a really slow traveling bullet, it can penetrate and form the wavelength of the suit, so it goes straight through it. So what happens sometimes is even when I've got my suit of armor on, someone can get this really penetrating bullet or stab at me that just manages to find that chink in the armor. That's when again I have this. I can have a mental health crisis and a loss of confidence. And I'll hold it in my mind for weeks and weeks and months and months and months. And I still talk about it when the parcel delivery person on my doorstep handed me my parcel and then goes, "Here you are, buddy." And I thought, would you ever address my wife in that way? No, you probably wouldn't.
no,
Or the ice cream salesman near where I live on the beach handed me an ice cream and go, "Here you are, mate." And I thought, again, if my wife was buying that ice cream, would you have spoken to her in that way? So there's subtle interactions, microaggressions, if you want to call them
absolutely,
microaggressions, always remind me that I'm not good enough. I'm not passing someone's test. So I understand exactly what you're saying. You go into these environments to have these conversations, to just smile and enjoy life, and all of a sudden, this one little thing may seem like a minor thing, but it's a macro aggression, not a microaggression. It slaps you around the face sometimes and says, "Ha ha, you're not good enough."
Yeah,
So I get what you're saying there.
absolutely. And it's so easy as well. It's so easy to, I think, especially, when we talk about how we communicate nowadays, the art of conversation, I think, is dying out. The art of text, WhatsApp, email, you know, um, WebEx chats, online chats, Facebook chats, Twitter, Instagram. You know, it's very easy to look at a comment or look at an email that you may get, and you read it completely wrong. The words are the same, but you read it in the complete opposite way to the person who's writing it has said it. So, or has written it. So there. One thing that I was very bad at, that I've literally changed in the last 6 months. I've So I'm quite an upbeat, outgoing, friendly character. I'll make time for everybody if I can. It's probably one of my weaknesses. I make too much time for everybody and not enough time for myself at times. But um, I would talk on, or I would write as I talk, and so I would use an exclamation mark. Because I'm going, oh yeah, that's brilliant! Exclamation mark. And some people look at an exclamation mark as, oh, he's shouting at me. Oh, that's brilliant, or something like that. And they read it wrong. So I've now completely taken exclamation marks out of my life, and I've replaced them with smiley faces and sad faces. And so many of my emails at work, I'll go smiley face or unhappy face. It's like, oh, it, you know it, it's it's a shame that we couldn't have done it that way, unhappy face, or that's really brilliant, smiley face. um just
Yeah,
literally because I think some people were kind of like, oh, he's a bit angry, and I was probably really happy. So, and again, it's just a different way that we communicate, and we can quite easily misinterpret things.
yeah. You're so right. I actively pick an emoji if I'm going to use an emoji. Not what I would call the sort of the textbook. This is what the emoji means. I want to convey how I'm feeling. So if I mean, I don't know, I use the shruggy shoulders. If I think that's a bit of a statement, I have the slap face one, and I use the. So I'm happy to use the kind of expressions and the emojis, the laugh out loud, all this. So I like to pad my texts and sometimes my emails with that approachable, friendly reaction, as you say, rather than just the dot 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 or the exclamation mark or the thump thump thump, the punctuation that people use. So I think it's important that we learn to re-communicate that humanity in
Mm,
our non-verbal communication, because you're right, we've lost the art of rhetoric, we've lost the art of getting into debate and discussion in a respectful way. It's confrontation, it's block, it's flame, it's target, it's destroy, it's judge. And we don't start off again. I come back to what I said earlier. It's about understanding someone's perspectives. You don't have to agree with somebody. Just go, okay, I get it. I understand why you're saying that.
yeah,
Our answer's different, but our workings out are similar. So
absolutely,
it's just we have a different
absolutely.
outcome, and I think we lose that often in text, in brief communications on Twitter. I mean, Twitter is a really tough place to exist as a minority.
Yeah,
There's too much going on there.
no, I agree. I agree. And I'm one of these people who, I do tend to beat myself up if I think that um, I could have upset somebody. I've always been one of those people, um, and I go about life, kind of like, you all right, you all right, you all right, you all right, and that's just me. That's my mum's side of me coming out, and I am turning into my dad. What can I do about helping other people? What can I do to do this better? And what can I do to educate other people and be educated myself? I wanted to mention there was something that I saw, a colleague over in Poland had. One of our offices in Poland have been doing a diversity and inclusion competition type of thing, and they've been producing videos about what diversity and inclusion means to those groups, and one of them came out with the line, "What if we had glasses that saw the mind and soul of our colleagues?" And I thought, oh, I like that. That's really quite deep, but wouldn't that be quite good if you could actually sit and have a conversation with somebody and have a pair of glasses on to see what they were thinking? Where you talk about my superpower, I've changed my superpower now. I want glasses that can, when I'm having a conversation with somebody, I can see if they're happy, if they're sad. How can I help them become happy if they are sad? What's going on in their mind, if they are from a different gender, ethnicity, disability, if they're sat there, not having the confidence to talk about it. If I had my glasses on, I could see that and I could help them. So if you could see inside a mind and if you could see inside a soul, that'd be pretty damn good superpower, I think. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that with you.
Let me push back on that. Let me just push back on that. Isn't that lazy? Isn't that asking for your superpower to do all the heavy lift for you? Isn't it more fun to find that out for yourself and actually invest that time to have that conversation? Say, how are you? Come on, how are you feeling? Be vulnerable yourself. I'll share something
Absolutely.
about me. You share something about you. And at the end of it, we're comfortable with each other. That we let go and share. And I love the idea of. I think I always wanted a pair of glasses to work out if people were attracted to me when I was younger. You can always look at someone and have like a red light if they like me, or so if they didn't like me, and a green light if they like me, to make dating easier. But
Yeah,
yeah, there is no easy outcome. You have to invest to get back, don't you?
that's absolutely right. You've got to work hard in life. You've got to work hard to
Hmm.
get to know people. Uh, You know, it would be so easy if you just had a pair of glasses, but we know that pair of glasses is never going to happen. That pair of glasses will never exist where you could just look inside somebody's mind. So you're absolutely right. You've got to invest the time to actually make the effort if you want to make the effort. If you want to get to know people, you know, it, it, just as long as you do things and as long as you ask in the right way, in a non-judgmental way, in a friendly, kind, caring way, it can be absolutely anything. And if you're prepared to listen and learn and understand, um, it makes us a better person, and it makes the person that you've just interacted with feel a better person themselves, because you kind of like they feel like, well, actually, no, that is quite kind, and it is somebody actually genuinely. I was on an event at work a couple of days ago about Diwali, and one of our colleagues, there were four colleagues talking about Diwali and their faith, um, and one of them said the most lovely thing. Um, she said, if anybody in the local office has never been to a temple before and would like to go to a temple, I'm sure any of us would be happy to take you to our temple so that you could experience it. And I thought, how good's that? I wouldn't. I'm a kind, considerate, caring person, but I probably wouldn't say just off the top of my head, oh, hang on a minute, does anybody who's in Leeds just want to come to, you know, um, you know,
Yeah,
somewhere with me? And I thought that was pretty damn special. I really liked that, and I just wish there was more people that were that kind in the world. Um, you know,
I like that because
mm,
I kind of put my cards on the table. I don't consider myself as having any religious belief at all. Maybe kind of a spiritualism, but not a faith. And I have always felt uncomfortable being in a church, a Christian,
yeah,
either Catholic or Protestant church. I've always found it kind of uncomfortable being in that environment because it represents something that I don't have a faith or belief in. So, but I have visited places around the world, I've been to the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. I've done the full Jerusalem experience and some of the religious sites there. But I think because I saw it as more archaeological and not current,
Yeah.
or it was more like a museum. It didn't. It didn't. But I think that's a fantastic idea to, at least to understand about someone else's faith and belief,
Yeah.
to have that appreciation of what Islam means, what Buddhism means, what
Absolutely.
people who are Hindu
Yeah.
feel. So yeah, and to be invited into a place of worship, which is a very, I don't know, a very treasured and solid, sacred place to people, it's a real honour, and I think that's a really fantastic idea. Yeah,
I think so. And again, the lady who said it. I mean, I'm useless at guessing ages. You know, she wasn't. Um, I would class her as quite a young person. And I'm thinking, how many young people do I know who would say, if anybody, whatever age you are, whatever gender you are, whatever background you've got, if you want to come with me, I'll show you. And I was like, that is so impressive. And again, that's on the back of our multicultural network, set this session up. And it's just inspiring, and I think that's what, makes, I, I'm inspired by people, and that's what I quite often joke to people that I've got the best job at Aon where I work. I do a lot of presentations and I say, oh yeah, I've got the best job at Aon. Now, it might not be the highest paid job, and it might not be, the most rewarded job, but the reward is what I get inside. And I'm surrounded by great people that give me that reward. It might not be in my bank account at the end of the month. I get paid, yes, obviously, but I don't have targets, so I don't get certain
yeah,
bonuses and all those things, but I get so much more than a lot of people do, I
yeah. And
think.
people's worth and people's self-esteem goes far beyond monetary value. It is around satisfaction of their own sense of self. Are you aligned with what's important to you? And I think that is far more. I mean, it's easy for us to say we're in our later life. When I was in my 20s and 30s, maybe I had a different outlook, and I was definitely on that different part of my life curve where I wanted stuff and acquisition and property. And I
Yeah,
think when you get to your 50s, you realise that maybe the privileges you have a lot of that stuff, and that you can now focus on what's really important in life, which is around the work-life
absolutely,
balance,
absolutely.
family, the environment, just being a one with the world, and,
Yeah,
and getting remuneration from different elements other than just financial.
yeah, definitely. And giving back. Part of my role is community. Giving people the opportunity to get involved in mentoring or volunteering or charity work. And when I see people come back, somebody's emailed me this morning and said, "Oh, and I just wanted to let you know that I've become a governor at the local school." And I've never met this person. I don't know. I was looking back to see if I'd actually been in email communication with this person who just literally decided to tell me that this morning. And I was like, that's brilliant. I wake up on a Friday morning and somebody gives me that good news. And I was like, yeah, that starts my day in a really good mood now, because again, some great person's done something great. So, yeah, yeah, it's, my one thing that I would just say to everybody is just take what you can out of life, um, in the most positive way from whatever um, angles that you can take it, and just try and just try and enjoy it. Try and be happy. Try and put those negatives to one side. Focus on the positives. If you need a bit of support, find somebody who's going to give you that support, because there are people out there that will give people support. Um, yeah, and take inspiration from people. I take inspiration from a lot of people. I've got my next door neighbour. Their daughter plays football, and she's in West Virginia. She's 21 and she's playing football in America. And once or twice a week, I get to watch her games live because her dad sends me a link. And I just think, I wish I was that bold. When I was 21 years old, I wish I had the courage to achieve my ambition, and her ambition is she wanted to be a female footballer. Now she's off in America playing football. And I'm just, people like that inspire me, and yeah, couldn't make me happier to see people, around me inspiring me.
Thank you, Iain. The title of this episode was To Talk, to Listen and to Learn. We've talked, I've listened, and I've learned. So for me, I think the objective of this session has been met. So it's been absolutely fantastic having a conversation with you. We could have, we're over the hour. We could have gone on for another hour, I'm sure, very easily. And maybe we'll catch up for a coffee another time. So how can people get in touch with you, some of our listeners, if they want to connect with you, find out more about what you're doing, maybe they need some inspiration for their own staff networks or webinar series? What's the best way to
Yeah.
find you?
Joanne, so probably the best way is LinkedIn. If people are on LinkedIn, I'm looking at LinkedIn every day. So it's Iain Chapman. It's two I's. Iain with two I's. Iain Chapman. Feel free to get in contact. I'm more than happy to connect with people. And yeah, no, and thank you. I've really enjoyed this morning. It's as you can probably tell, I love a chat, but I love a positive, chat, and I feel this has been a really positive session. And hopefully, if anybody who's listening feels that they can take just one little nugget of positivity into their day, then that's a big tick for me. And thank you, Joanne, for setting these things up.
Fantastic. And so a huge thank you to the listeners that if you kept going to the end, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in and getting this far. If you're not already doing so, please subscribe and keep updated on future episodes of the Inclusion Bites podcast at BITES. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, share the links. That'd be much appreciated. I have a number of other exciting guests lined up that I'm sure you'll also be inspired by over the next few weeks and months. And obviously, I have back catalogue of another 49 episodes if you want to review and go through those as well. So also, if you'd like to be a guest, I'm always looking for guests to share your stories, share your passion, then please let me know. And if you have any feedback or suggestions on future shows and how we can improve, then send them to joe.lockwood@seachangehappen.co.uk. My name is Joanne Lockwood, and it's been an absolute pleasure to host this podcast for you today. Catch you next time. Bye.